October 12, 1944. Just after sunrise. The Philippine Sea, east of Formosa. Low clouds hang over the water. The sea looks calm, almost empty. Then engines roar in from the south. Dozens of aircraft skim the waves. Their wings cut through mist and spray. Japanese sailors look up from their decks. They expect bombs. They expect machine gun fire. They get something else. White streaks leap from the wings of the attackers. They move fast. Too fast. A split second later, explosions tear across the convoy. Ships shudder. Deck guns vanish in fire. Fuel drums burst. Smoke climbs straight into the morning air. Japanese pilots scramble to intercept. They dive through the haze, searching for the enemy. They see American fighters pulling up hard, already gone. The sea below burns. Wreckage floats where ships once held formation. The sound is new. A sharp ripping roar, followed by instant impact. No long bomb whistle, no time to turn, no warning. Crewmen shout. Officers try to signal course changes. It is already too late. Another wave screams in low. More rockets flash, more ships erupt. This is not a single attack. It is not an accident. It is the arrival of a new way of killing ships at sea. A method that will change convoy warfare across the Pacific. And this moment is only the beginning of a much larger story. If you want more stories like this, make sure to subscribe, like, and share. By 1943, the war in the Pacific had changed. Japan still held Long Island chains. Its army depended on ships to move food, fuel, and ammunition. Convoys ran from China, Indochina, and the Dutch East Indies to the home islands. American submarines were already sinking many of them. But submarines could not be everywhere. The United States needed a way to strike shipping from the air. Bombing ships was hard. Dive bombing required steep attacks and long training. Level bombing missed moving targets. Strafing exposed pilots to heavy fire. Engineers and commanders looked for something simpler, something fast, something that hit hard. The answer came from a basic idea. Put a powerful rocket under an aircraft wing. Fire it straight at the target. Let speed and mass do the rest. By 1944, American aircraft began carrying high-velocity aircraft rockets, often called HVARs. Each rocket was 5 inches in diameter, carried a warhead weighing over 40 pounds. Fired at high speed, it flew nearly straight out to more than a mile. It could punch through steel plating and explode inside. Fighters like the F-6F Hellcat and F-4U Corsair could carry up to 6 or 8 rockets. Attack planes like the SB-2C Helldiver and the TBF Avenger carried them too. A single squadron could send dozens of rockets in seconds. This weapon fit American strengths. The United States had industry, fuel, and training time. Pilots could practice low-level attacks. Rockets required less precision than bombs. They also allowed planes to stay low and fast, reducing exposure to enemy fire. The goal was clear: break Japanese supply lines, starve garrisons, isolate battlefields. Rockets became one more tool to do it. At first, rockets did not impress everyone. Early tests were rough. Rockets wobbled in flight, some failed to ignite. Others broke apart after launch. Training reports complained. One pilot wrote, "Accuracy poor beyond short range." Another said, "Rocket drop unpredictable." Pilots needed hours of practice to learn aiming. Rockets did not fly like bullets. They dropped slightly and reacted to speed and angle. Early training units lost aircraft to low-altitude errors. One report noted 3 crashes in a single week during practice runs. There were tactical doubts too. Some commanders believed rockets were only useful against ground targets. Ships moved. Ships shot back. Dive bombing still seemed more reliable. Japanese forces also underestimated the threat. Convoy escorts focused on high-altitude bombers and submarines. Anti-aircraft guns were set for steeper angles. Many crews had little training against fast, low attackers. Early combat use showed mixed results. During strikes in early 1944, several rocket attacks missed completely. Pilots fired too far out. Warheads skipped across the water. One squadron reported only 2 hits from more than 30 rockets fired. Enemy pilots mocked the new weapon at first. One Japanese after-action report described ineffective fire from low-flying enemy planes. But these problems did not last. Training improved. Sights were adjusted. Pilots learned to fire closer. They learned to attack in pairs and waves. The weapon was not failing. It was waiting to be understood. By mid-1944, crews began to see what rockets could really do. The key was range and speed. Rockets worked best fired between 800 and 1,200 yards. At that distance, the aircraft stayed fast and low. Enemy gunners had seconds to react. Pilots learned to aim at the waterline. A rocket that hit there could break a hole or explode inside an engine room. Even near misses caused damage. The blast could tear open plating below the surface. Against escorts, rockets were deadly. Destroyers and patrol boats relied on thin armor and speed. A single rocket could disable steering or knock out a gun mount. Multiple hits could sink a ship outright. Fighter pilots also learned timing. Rockets fired in a shallow dive stayed accurate. Firing too steep wasted speed. Too shallow risked skipping. Data from combat showed rising success. One Navy report noted a hit rate of nearly 20% by late 1944. That may sound low, but each hit mattered. Single rocket could cripple a freighter. Rockets also changed behavior. Convoys began to scatter when rockets appeared. Ships turned hard. Formation discipline broke. That made them easier targets for follow-up attacks. Pilots gained confidence. One Corsair pilot wrote, "Rockets end the fight fast." The weapon had found its role. It was not a replacement for bombs or torpedoes. It was a shock weapon, fast, violent, precise enough. Now it would be tested in full-scale battle. The first major shock came during the Formosa air battles in October 1944. American carrier groups struck. Japanese airfields and shipping around Taiwan, hundreds of aircraft flew daily sorties. On October 13th, a convoy south of Tako was spotted. It included 4 cargo ships and 3 escorts, whether it was broken cloud with good visibility near the surface. A strike group of Hellcats and Avengers went in low. The lead pilots briefed quickly. Rockets first, guns after. As they approached, Japanese gunners opened fire. Tracers rose in slow arcs. Pilots fired rockets at under 1,000 yards. White smoke trails flashed across the water. 2 rockets slammed into the lead freighter. Flames erupted along the deck. Another hit the stern, jamming the rudder. The ship veered out of line. An escort tried to turn toward the attackers. A rocket hit near the bridge. The explosion ripped through the superstructure. The ship slowed, smoke pouring out. Japanese pilots arrived late. They dove through the chaos, firing blindly. One shouted over the radio, "Too low, too fast." He pulled up as American fighters climbed away. By the end of the attack, 2 ships were sinking. The rest scattered. No American aircraft were lost in the rocket run. Weeks later, in November 1944, rockets played a major role in attacks during the Battle of Leyte Gulf aftermath. Japanese forces tried to move reinforcements and supplies through the central Philippines. On November 25th, a convoy near Ormac Bay was detected. It included several transports packed with troops. The bay was narrow. Mountains pressed close to the shore. American Marine Corsairs attacked from different directions. Pilots flew at mast height. They fired rockets almost point blank. One pilot recalled seeing a rocket strike just below a cargo ship bridge. The blast blew men into the air. The ship slowed instantly. Japanese anti-aircraft fire was heavy. Pilots felt impacts on wings and fuselage. One Corsair took hits but stayed airborne. Short radio calls filled the air. "Firing now. Good hit. Pulling up." Within minutes, the bay was filled with smoke and burning oil. Troops jumped into the water. Some tried to swim to shore. Japanese fighters arrived and chased the attackers out, but the damage was done. Supplies meant for the front never arrived. A third encounter came in early 1945 near the coast of Indochina. By this time, Japanese shipping was desperate. Small convoys hugged the coast. They moved at night when possible. On January 12th, American carrier aircraft launched a massive raid on shipping along the coast. The weather was clear, the sea calm. Pilots found dozens of small ships. Many were lightly armed. Rockets were ideal. Attack planes worked in sections of 4. 2 fired rockets, 2 followed with guns. The rhythm was steady. Dive slightly, fire pull up, turn away. Japanese gunners fired wildly. Many rockets hit. Some ships exploded instantly, others burned slowly. One Japanese pilot later described the scene. The sea was full of fire lines. Ships vanished under smoke. By the end of the day, dozens of vessels were destroyed or damaged. Japanese air response was weak. Fuel shortages, limited sorties. These encounters showed a pattern. Rockets overwhelmed convoys before defenders could react. They shattered morale. They broke formations. They turned the sea into a killing ground. Behind these attacks stood enormous industrial power. By late 1944, American factories produced thousands of rockets each month. Aircraft carriers carried large stocks. Forward bases stored crates of them. Training adapted. Pilots practiced rocket runs regularly. Manuals were updated. Squadrons shared lessons learned. Logistics favored the Allies. Rockets were simpler to store than torpedoes. They required less maintenance. Aircraft could reload quickly. Japanese industry could not match this pace. Fuel shortages, limited training hours. Replacement pilots had little experience against low-level attacks. Anti-aircraft upgrades came too late. American aircraft flew thousands of rocket sorties. Losses were relatively low compared to bombing runs. The balance favored the attacker. Compared to Japanese air-launched weapons, rockets were faster to deploy and easier to aim. Japanese forces relied more on bombs and torpedoes that required careful setup. Rockets did not win the war alone, but they made convoys vulnerable at all times. Daylight became dangerous. Coastal routes became death traps. The impact on Japanese morale was real. Sailors feared the sudden attacks. There was no warning siren, no long approach. Diaries mention the terror. One sailor wrote, "The sky spat fire. Ships broke apart." Pilots gave rockets nicknames. Some called them flying hammers. Others just said those white streaks. Convoys hugged shorelines or waited for night. Escorts stayed close, but that made them easier targets. Fear spread to pilots as well. Intercepting rocket-armed fighters was risky. They stayed low and fast. Chasing them meant diving into gunfire. Morale reports noted increased stress. Crews slept in life jackets. Officers reported discipline problems after repeated attacks. The weapon did not just destroy ships, it broke confidence. It made movement feel impossible. As the war went on, rockets evolved. Warheads improved. Fuses became more reliable. Some rockets were designed for deeper penetration. Pilots refined tactics. Coordinated attacks became standard. Rockets were used alongside bombs and torpedoes. Aircraft carried more rockets as racks improved. Some planes could fire all rockets in a single pass or ripple them in sequence. Late war strikes combined rockets with napalm and gunfire. The goal was total suppression. By 1945, rockets were also used against airfields, trains, and vehicles. Their role expanded as targets dwindled. Japanese defenses adapted slightly. More light guns appeared. Camouflage improved. But the core problem remained. Rockets were fast and deadly. By the end of the war, rockets were a proven weapon. They'd moved from experiment to standard equipment. When the fighting ended, the record was clear. A rocket-armed aircraft had destroyed hundreds of Japanese ships. Exact numbers varied, but the impact was undeniable. They helped isolate islands. They starved garrisons. They forced Japan to risk dangerous routes. Early doubts had faded. Pilots respected the weapon. Enemies feared it. One Japanese naval officer later said when the white fire came, there was no defense. The rocket did not win fame like the bomb or the torpedo, but it earned its place. It showed how speed, simplicity, and mass production could reshape combat. From shaky beginnings to brutal efficiency, the rocket became a symbol of modern air power and left a legacy of sudden, unstoppable force at sea.